Good, thanks, Peter. Thank you for all your organizational efforts. Before we start, I would like everybody just to check which is their predominant nostril at the moment. Have you got a predominant nostril? Mine is my right one at the moment. Just make a note of that, and we will come back to that. A few preliminary words about doing these sessions on Zoom. Look, ideally, of course, one will do a class in breathing live so that I could see people breathing, and it's much easier for people to feedback their experiences because it's all about feedback. As I said in the first session, it's all about trying something out, sensing the body's reaction to it, and then proceeding on that basis. So my getting your feedback about breathing is the most important thing. And this is, of course, much more difficult on Zoom. If we were meeting in person, it would be easier. All the more reason then to proceed cautiously when you're doing your own breathing practice, especially if you have, respiratory problems, cardiac problems, psychological issues like panic disorder, etc. So good to do things in person, and that's why it is especially important that you don't take my words as gospel. This is not intended as any sort of medical advice. So please bear that in mind. Now, to recap, the first function of breathing is to, when we take control of our breathing, is to influence the nervous system by stimulating inspiration, first of all, to perk us up and stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. Let's do 3 rounds of that sniffing breath, which is part of the picking grapes. We're not going to do the picking grapes, too difficult, but we're going to do the sniffing part. So I'll just demonstrate that. So it's a little pause. So that's 4 sniffs, little pause, 4 sniffs, and then a forceful exhalation. I'll demonstrate one more time. Good. Let's do 3 rounds of sniffing, starting now. And relax. Check out how you're feeling. If you're a bit spacey or dizzy or woozy, it might be because you've lowered your CO2 too much. Note if you feel a little bit perked up, a little bit clearer. Second thing we've been talking about is extending expiration to relax the nervous system. Extending expiration. So let's do a couple of minutes of that practice. We'll do 4 in and 8 out with my metronome. If you don't like 4 in, 8 out, do 3 in and 6 out. So I won't count in case you're doing 3 in and 6 out, but I'll keep the metronome on. And we'll do 4 in, 6 out. Remember, if any time you start getting dizzy or feeling unwell or any peculiar symptoms, then simply stop, hold your breath for a few seconds, and resume normal breathing. All will be well. Okay, so let's start breathing 4 in and 8 out, or 3 in and 6 out. And I'll tell you when a couple of minutes is up. As relaxed as possible. Relaxing into low, slow, diaphragmatic breathing. Not taking large breaths, we're just taking enough breath that we can breathe in a relaxed way. One more. Good. With that kind of ratio, 4 in and 8 out, we want to be nice and relaxed. With most breathing practices, we want to be nice and relaxed. Not all breathing practices, by all means, but generally speaking, we want to be nice and relaxed, because that way we get nice and relaxed abdominal diaphragmatic breathing. And that's what we want. We want that relaxed breathing to be signaling back to the nervous system. All is well. You can relax. You can let go. And the great thing about expiration is that every time we breathe out, we let go. Letting go is built in to the system. But the key always is, can we really let go. The essence of relaxation, letting go. And the breathing is a wonderful metaphor for general letting go, just letting go of stuff. Nothing new can happen to us if we don't let go of the old. I mean, it's obvious, of course. And it's exemplified in that story, that Zen story, which for many of you will be familiar with it, of the university professor who goes and sees the Zen master. And he wants to quiz him, you see, because this university professor is very learned in Buddhist studies. So he thinks he's going to quiz the Zen master and, you know, perhaps show how learned and how on the ball he is. So the Zen master invites him in and serves tea, starts pouring the tea into the professor's cup, keeps on pouring until the tea is overflowing. And the professor says, stop, stop. No more can go in, no more can go in. Zen master says, well, that's exactly the way your mind is. It's full to overflowing with facts. Nothing else can go in. And this is what we have to be so wary of. Constantly building up a story, which we think is reality, and not letting anything pass that doesn't fit that story. Not being able to let go of the story. Let go of concepts, let go of judgments, etc. The parallel in the body is exploration, letting go, let yourself go. So every time we exhale, we've got that advantage that the body naturally relaxes. The parasympathetic system naturally begins to be active when we exhale. And all relaxation methods allow us to surf in on the outbreak. Like that. If we are, taking a very instant brief break, we take a brief break, and we let go before we start doing again, doing. But a deep breath and letting go, with a sigh, has to be a sigh, and splashing some cold water on your face are wonderfully refreshing ways of very briefly resetting. Okay. Any comments?
I have a comment, Paul, or more a question.
With
the 4-8 breathing, I find that I can breathe in for the 4, breathe out for the 4, and then I've got to hold for the 4. I don't have enough breath to breathe out for 8. What am I doing wrong?
Well, this is such a good comment. So it sounds like, well, there are two possibilities. You're not breathing in enough, or you're breathing out too quickly. Okay. And controlling expiration so that you're breathing out slowly is really important when you get to the higher ratios, like breathing in for 6 and out for 18, or in for 8 and out for 24. And that is facilitated by what I'll be talking about later today, which is humming or chanting. So you can slow down the rate at which you breathe out by vocalizing. But it may well be that you also have to expand your vital capacity Now, vital capacity is something I'm coming on to in just a moment. So we'll come back to you and vital capacity in a moment. Terrific. Well, great. Thank you for that comment. That's terrific. So let's do the third basic practice for 2 minutes, which is the balanced breath, which balances the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and ideally produces that state which we desire most of the day, which is alert, relaxed. Alert, relaxed. Alert, relaxed is the way to get things done. There is a myth that we have to be somewhat sympathetically stimulated, like we have to have adrenaline in our system to get things done. This is a complete and absolute myth, which has been trotted out for at least 40 or 50 years in Western psychology, and it's based on absolutely false premises. You get things done when you're in a state of optimal arousal, which is alert and relaxed. You don't need sympathetic stimulation. You don't need slight over-arousal for optimal performance. If you're doing the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics, it's good to have a little extra arousal when you're standing in the blocks. But every day, no, alert or relaxed, your stress hormones are nice and even. They're ready to help you do stuff, but they're not overtaxing your reserves. So look, I'm not going to count again. You're going to do whatever suits you for 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8. Just for a couple of minutes. Again, the key is relaxed. Just relax. Okay, where we go. Starting now. One more round. Good. Remember, always relax the shoulders. Drop down, relax. Relaxation is the key. Any comments before we proceed?
Yes. Can I ask a question, please?
Go for it.
Is it okay in the same session of breathing to extend from 4-4 to 6-6 to 8-8 as feels nice? Or should you pick a lane and think I'm a 4-4 girl or a 6-6 girl?
Such a good question. And look, I can only tell you what I do, which is to do both. I do like 8-8. It's very relaxing and restful for me. But I do 8-8 for a while, and then I go up a bit. I go 10-10, 12-12. I might go up to 16-16. Then I come back to 8-8, do it for a while before stopping. You get two benefits that way. You're doing the balanced breath with all its benefits to the autonomic nervous system, but you're also increasing your vital capacity, your ability to take in air. And we will come on to that in a moment. So again, it's all to do with what feels comfortable for you, what your body is telling you. My body tells me, look, it's great, 8-8, this is real nice, we're going to stay there for a while. But my body also tells me, oh, good to take some really deep breaths, but in a controlled way, not in a hyperventilatory sort of way. So that would be my answer.
Okay. And also elsewhere, previously I was taught pranayama in a yoga setting, and we were taught to take a rest. And I remember previously when you spoke to Conquering Chronic Illness, you said, if I remember correctly, you said that taking a rest makes no difference to your CO2 results. But I like...
You're talking about the pause between holding, between expiration and inspiration.
Yes, but as I was taught, it was both, and a pause between the in-breath and the out-breath, and at the end of the out-breath.
Yes.
2 pauses.
Yes. So one would do something like 6-3, 6-3.
I enjoy a pause at the end of the expiration. Is there any harm in it?
No, no. And again, excellent that you brought that up. Sri Bala, who I learned so much from, he used to always teach the balanced breath with retention. So, yeah, 6, in for 6, hold for 3, out for 6, hold for 3, for example.
Right.
The hold does not enhance heart rate variability. In my experience, it's slightly disruptive for heart rate variability. And you don't get the lovely smooth variation in the so-called sinus arrhythmia. It doesn't look quite the same. So you pay your money, you take your choice. Again, what feels right? Sometimes I do breath retention because it feels right to do it. And as you say, in traditional pranayama, it is the retention which they say is so much associated with the longevity effects of pranayama. Because obviously in pranayama, you're holding the prana and allowing it to be absorbed for longer, etc. So there's no right way. There's no right way. If you have your own heart rate variability monitor, and if you have your own CO2 monitor, then you can monitor these things for yourself. And if you use those parameters in particular, you can see what effect they have. But the bottom line is, does it feel good? Does it feel good? If it feels good for you, do the breath retention. There are various traps in breath retention. If you're depressed, you tend to prolong the period between exhalation and the next inhalation. That is the bottom of the breath curve. You tend to reside there, and that's not good. So if you're depressed, I advise against breath retention, especially at the end of expiration, because you don't want to be stuck there. You can retain after inspiration because you've got to make an effort and it stimulates the system, but not at the bottom. If you're not depressed and you want to relax, then by all means, of course, prolong that retention phase at the end of expiration, because there you reside in the peace of non-doing.
Well, that's very interesting, because what the yoga teacher said was in the retention, in the pause, as she called it, she said, therein lies the peace. And that's what I feel. But I'm very interested in your comment, because I have to, I struggle with depression, and it's exactly where you said not to pause, that I want to pause.
Right.
So what is it? I won't anymore. So what is it that it does?
Well, you have to find out for you.
Well, I feel the peace, but I don't want to be depressed.
But I mean, look, if you're feeling the peace, maybe that's good for your depression. You have to persist in that practice and see the overall effect over time. It's the only way you can know.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I can't give you a more precise answer, but these things are so individualistic.
Well, but why did they say don't pause after expiration if you tend to depression?
Because you don't want to be too much in parasympathetic mode in depression. Look, this is a whole other piece, what's happening in depression. And at the end of expiration, basically there's an energy slump, and you don't want to stay there too long if you're depressed. So, but I may come back to your question because it's such a good one, and it's a little bit of a topic that needs plenty of elaboration.
Please do.
Okay. Now, the other thing we talked about last time was running a low CO2. If you're chronically distressed or traumatized, or you've got respiratory problems, or you're just wearing tight clothing or whatever, you get into a pattern of more superficial chest breathing and you run a low CO2. That requires a whole different set of approaches, which we talked about last time, the Buteyko method, for example, and the Oxygen Advantage, that excellent book by Patrick McKeown, and all the practices therein. This is why it's incredibly important, I think, to have a capnometer. Peter has raised the question of finding a cheap capnometer online, and that's something else we will address. But knowing if you're running a chronically low CO2 is super important, because you would want to follow that course of action to raise your CO2 over time, rather than doing some of the practices we've already done today, which can stimulate overventilation and low CO2. And even if you've really slowed up your breath, let's say you're doing 8 in and 8 out, well, you're doing less than 3 breaths a minute, but your body will compensate by, of course, taking deeper breaths. So you can't necessarily remedy the CO2 situation by doing those sorts of practices. Deep relaxation will remedy the situation. Improving sleep will remedy the situation over time. But the Buteyko methods or other methods that emphasize slow breathing, will very much help the process. You can do both. You can do, for example, balanced breath, and make sure your breathing is shallow enough that you're just a little bit uncomfortable and you feel that you would like to take a little bit of a deeper breath. You carry on doing the count, the 8 in and 8 out, but you just hover on the sensation of feeling you'd like a little bit more breath, but not distressing. We don't want to stress the system, and that's the most important thing. Whatever we're doing, we don't stress the system. We just go into it very gently. Okay. Having a capnometer is a great advantage. Okay, let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about deep breathing. When we take a breath, the pressure inside the thorax goes down. And this has the effect of pulling down glymph from the brain. Now, glymph is the lymphatic system in the brain, drains off toxins and metabolic products from the brain. Hasn't been discovered for very long, you know, gosh, this is relatively new. So deep breathing sucks waste products out of your brain. Terrific, because deterioration of the brain in later life is almost certainly due to toxic damage from metabolic products. It's got nothing to do with plaque or anything, and the plaque in Alzheimer's is the result of this metabolic damage from the fact that the brain is a highly active metabolic organ. It's burning 20% of the body's calories, but it's only at 1.5 kilograms on average in weight. Extraordinary. It's burning 20% of the body's energy. So it's like a computer chip. You know, my computer here can feel the hot air coming out because that little chip in there has got to be cooled. It's so active. Brain is just the same. It has to be cooled. And it has to have metabolic products rapidly removed. So every time we take a decent breath, we are promoting detoxification of the brain, which in itself would be a very good idea for doing, a very good reason for doing, say, a balanced breath. And particularly doing your favorite ratio, the one that suits you best, and which may give maximum heart rate variability for you. And then going up the scale a bit, stretching yourself a little bit to really deep breaths, and unless you've got CO2 problems, by the way, and then coming back down, resting in your normal ratio for a while to rebalance the system, but you've given the breathing a bit of a workout. So that's a huge benefit of deep breathing. And it's very interesting that the Framingham study, I'll just tell you what the Framingham study is if you haven't come across it, tells us that vital capacity correlates very strongly with your risk of dying. The Framingham study, for those who don't know it, it's a study that's been going on in Framingham, Massachusetts since 1948. So 75 years. And they originally enlisted a whole bunch of men, and they said, well, we're going to follow you guys. We're going to, you know, take all your blood tests, take all your measurements, and we'll see basically who develops cardiovascular disease. and work out then what the risks for cardiovascular disease are. And Framingham has gone on ever since. You know, they're now examining subsequent generations, and they've had a massive amount of data about what's good for you and what are risk factors for cardiovascular and other things. So they have found that if you have low, what they call forced vital capacity, we'll demonstrate that in a minute, you are 3 times more likely to die in a specified period than if you have normal vital capacity. What is vital capacity? It's your ability to breathe in air. Basically, it's the total amount of air that your lungs can take you. And we measure vital capacity by spirometry, so you go to a lab and all to do that. But this is how you feel your vital capacity. You take a deeper breath as you can. Let's all do this. Oh, shoulders back. Get it all in, and then out as much as you can, blowing up a balloon. And back to normal. So that maximum amount from the top of your inspiration to the bottom of your expiration, that's your vital capacity. And that's why it's good to exercise your vital capacity. Vital capacity goes down as we get older, understandably. Respiratory muscles get weaker. All the joints that are involved in the rib cage, etc., get creakier, and the lungs themselves lose elasticity. But by practicing deep breathing, we mitigate all of those factors and retain vital capacity. Let's do another very deep breath. Unless you felt a bit strange on the last one, don't do another one. But let's do a vital capacity. In, shoulders back, looking up, and then and back to normal. Very good. Anybody got a query about that?
Quick question. How many times or for how long would you recommend doing that procedure?
You have to find out. Look,
What's the deal?
initially, you only do it once.
Oh,
If you're doing something like picking grapes, then you are naturally exploring your whole vital capacity, because you go up, you open up the chest,
yep.
you're sniffing till you can't sniff anymore, and then
Yep.
you're doing that forced expiration all the way out. Now, that's terrific to do that, but as we get older, we've got to be cautious. So you just start with, say, one of those.
Yep.
And you gradually build up over time. No one can tell you how quickly to proceed. At any point, you get to feel a bit weird, a bit dizzy, etc. You have to back off and go back to where you were. But with the picking grapes, I do about 7 in the morning on average. If I'm lazy, I do 5. If I'm enthusiastic, I do 9. That's not too much for me. I could go on longer, probably, but that's just right for me. I have to be aware of getting too low a CO2. That's one of my metabolic physiological peculiarities. So I don't overbreathe for too long.
Is that different to sighing when you sigh out, or is that similar?
No, it's different.
Okay.
I mean, look, we're in the same ballpark, and sighing, I'm coming on to in a minute, funnily enough.
Yep.
So we will return to sighing in a moment, Carol.
I'll look forward to it. Okay. Thanks, Paul. Bye. Yeah.
You know, with breathing, again, it always comes back to this point. All of these methods and prescriptions have to be taken with your individual response in mind and gradually building up over time. You know, I think there's a reasonable amount of evidence that, you know, we acquire new habits and the body adjusts to new habits over a period of not really less than 3 months. You've got to give it a good 3 months.
Paul,
So, yeah, sorry.
have you any clues as to how we would know if we were increasing our vital capacity by doing that practice of the top of the inspiration to the bottom of the expiration?
Look, you know those little things that asthmatics blow into, those tubes that asthmatics blow into to measure their so-called forced expiratory volume, and to see where they are, where their asthma is at. You can get those and test yourself on those, because what's called the FEV1, which is how much air you can expire in 1 second in those tubes, is a measure of, is a close measure of your vital capacity. It's about 70% of your total vital capacity. The vital capacity in women is less than men. In men, it's usually around 4.5 liters. In women, it's 3 1/4, 3.5 liters. But I don't think one should worry too much about the absolute figures. I think just working on your vital capacity, you will feel your capacity to breathe improve.
Okay, thank you.
But to actually get a proper figure, you have to go to a spirometry lab where they have lots of fancy stuff to measure these things. Okay. And moving on to the nose. Nose facts. Coming back to the nose, very, very important. And when we're talking about vital capacity or picking grapes or whatever, we're not always talking about breathing through the nose all the time. Most of the time, we want to breathe through the nose. Super important. 2 reasons. Well, there are lots of reasons. The 2 new reasons I'm putting are: 1, the nose breathing cools the brain, and it is a very significant cooler of the brain. And you can demonstrate this by an interesting experiment. Some people believe that yawning is a way of cooling the brain, because in a yawn, you do stuff with your facial muscles that promotes facial and then brain circulation, which flushes the brain out a little bit, cools it down a bit. And in experiments, they induce yawning by getting people to watch videos of people yawning, because you know that yawning is infectious. So you have people yawning away because they're watching a video of people yawning. Now, if you put cold packs on their face, they don't get infectious yawning. They don't get it. Well, their chances of getting it are much reduced, which is kind of fascinating. That seems to imply that yawning has to do with cooling the brain by increasing the circulation. Okay, The other thing is that the nasal sinuses, these cavities which are beside the nasal cavity, the paranasal sinuses, produce nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide, you know, is laughing gas. It was only discovered as a human transmitter, as being used in the body as a nerve transmitter, a little over 30 years ago. And so it's a relative newcomer on the block. And it does lots of exciting things. Importantly, it relaxes the smooth muscles in arterioles, in your peripheral blood vessels. So it warms your hands. And it relaxes the smooth muscle in your bronchi. So we know now that the paranasal sinuses secrete nitric oxide, which goes into the nose, which then goes down into the lungs and dilates the lungs. Has a good effect in keeping the bronchi open, which is amazing. So this nitric oxide mechanism is also, you know, how Viagra works, etc. So, you know, nitric oxide rules. So, good reasons for breathing through the nose. Now, another important fact about the nose, which I've touched on before, is the nasal cycle. We talked about the ultradian rhythm, where your cerebral hemispheres change dominance on average every couple of hours. The change in cerebral dominance is mirrored by the nasal cycle, which follows, they go together. The ultradian rhythm is a brain rhythm, it's a nose rhythm, it's an autonomic nervous system rhythm. They follow one another. So we have a nasal cycle, or at least some people have a nasal cycle, where your nostrils alternately are restricted and more open. They don't usually close up entirely, but they're more restricted or less open. That change happens every 2 hours or so. Now, quite a lot of research has been done on the nasal cycle. And we don't know what proportion of people have a good nasal cycle. And this is because it's difficult to measure and what you call a nasal cycle and what don't you, and there are differences in definition. So estimates vary as to how many people have a well-defined nasal cycle, anywhere from 20 or less % to 70 or more % people. So you may have a nasal cycle, you may not. If you don't have a clear nasal cycle, don't feel too bad about it. As long as you're breathing through your nose and both through nostrils some of the time, I wouldn't worry about it. But the nasal cycle lasts 2 hours. Interestingly, it's generally lasts a bit longer on the left side, which means that the right side of the brain is a bit more active in proportion to the left. But there are many caveats to that, so that's another story altogether. The nasal cycles are longer at night, but they carry on at night. And they are more prominent when we slow down our breathing. And if you're left-handed, you get a more prominent cycle on the left anyway. So it's an interesting phenomenon. And obviously, yogis have known about it for no doubt many centuries. And it's why they talk about alternate nostril breathing. Now, many of you will know about alternate nostril breathing. Alternate nostril breathing is a way of stimulating both cerebral hemispheres. So it's another way of really producing alert relaxation. But there are qualifications to that, which I'll come on to in a moment. Let's start by checking out what our nostrils are doing. Now you'll note where you were breathing in the first, before we started, as your nostril dominance changed. Mine's beginning to change from right to left. Anybody notice a change? Maybe too soon. They are changing only every 2 hours, so it may not be enough yet. Silence was the stern reply. Okay, I assume we're all good with that. Let's do some unilateral brain stimulation. We're going to breathe through one nostril and see if we can discern an effect on our opposite cerebral hemisphere. Now, I'm suggesting that those of you who have a patent on open right nostril, well, we're all going to try going through the right nostril, but if you can't, just don't do the exercise. That's cool. Let's do some forced unilateral nasal breathing and see how we feel after a minute or so. So we're going to do 8-8 or 6-6 or 4-4 through one nostril, preferably the right. We're going to be relaxed, easy, just breathe through one nostril. Have to block off the other one. Oh, and by the way, I mustn't forget before we do that, if you have difficulty breathing through your nostrils, there are things like the airflow, the tapes, you know, that you put on your nostril, which pull them apart a little bit. Airflow. Athletes sometimes use them. Okay, so let's do some unilateral nasal breathing. Whatever your favorite ratio, through the right nostril for a minute. Okay. Check out how you feel and see if you feel any different.
I feel much better, and I've actually had my heart rate monitor thing on, and my heart rate variability just became really good, the best it's been the whole time.
That's interesting. Very good. That's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll comment on that in a moment. By unilateral nasal breathing, we stimulate the opposite hemisphere. And this is well attested in research. If you get people to breathe forcefully through their right nostril, their verbal skills improve because the verbal centers are on the left. If you do it force unilateral breathing through the left nostril, their spatial skills improve. Because over the other side, that's where the spatial skills are in most people. But for our purposes, the interesting thing is that the left hemisphere is a bit more upbeat. You know, it's optimistic because it's prospective. Oh, what should we do next? You know, oh, what's coming up? Anticipation, you know, which is related to the dopamine pathways. Not that that's important, but it's looking forward to stuff. In animals, it's the side that's more concerned with foraging. So it's our foraging side. Just think of that. I mean, it's helpful actually. You know, most of the day we're foraging. You know, looking for the next. We're not looking for the next piece of food, although I usually am. We're looking for the next experience, but it's all the same thing. We're foraging for experience. The other side is, you know, the gloomy side, pessimistic side. What's to fear? It's the fear side, the avoidance side. So if you selectively stimulate the right hemisphere, you might start feeling more anxious or gloomy or depressed. So now, Emily, you said, but it was you, wasn't it, who said that your heart rate variability improves.
Yeah.
And so, and look, the heart rate variability will improve anyway if you feel good.
Mm.
If you're having a good, that's the heart thing. That's heart coherence. You know, you're having a good time. When you're having a good time, you're more coherent.
Yeah.
When you're having a bad time, when we're suffering, our systems become dissociated. They break up. You know, the flight, fear, freeze reaction is not good for coherence in the system because it starts assigning different priorities to different parts of the body, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
and one other thing I wanted to say, it was interesting you mentioned how that, so breathing through the right stimulates the left hemisphere with communication, because before I really didn't want to talk to anyone. And then that happened, I was like, oh, actually, I'm happy to say that.
that is great.
Mm.
That is great. The check is in the mail.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. No, that's very, very good feedback. Very good.
Paul,
Yes.
Paul, in yoga for many years, we did alternate nostril breathing, just left, right, left, right. And we were always told to finish on the left. And I never knew why. We were never told, and you've answered it, I think, on why the difference of what the left nostril achieves. Yeah, it makes sense.
Right.
Would you agree with that? Finish on the left if you're
Well,
alternating.
are you, Carol, but are you saying that you would take the last breath, the last in-breath on the left, or the last out-breath on the left?
Out, yes.
Yes, that's right.
Exhale, yes.
Yes, because your last stimulant breath, fully inspirational stimulant breath has been on the right side. Absolutely.
It's
Very
taken
nice
all
point.
these years.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, it's taken all these years to finally get an answer to that. I never thought about it until now. Yeah,
I
thank you.
mean, look, as you know, in yoga, there are explanations in terms of the energy currents, the Ida and Pingala energy currents, etc., which are all intuitive understandings of how all of this works.
Yeah.
Let's do. I mean, time flies. Let's do. So no, I haven't finished the thought. Don't want to overstretch people. You know, the human attention span is about 20 minutes. Something which I wish modern filmmakers would take into account. But we are not paying attention if you make a film of 2.5 to 3 hours. much as it would satisfy your artistic and directorial ambitions. We do not want these long films, as they knew in the 1940s, the good old days. That's my rave. Now, adding to the unilateral nasal breathing. You're on good grounds if you do it on the right side, because it'll improve your mood temporarily. And if you do it in conjunction with squeezing a squeegee ball with your right hand. I don't have a squeegee ball here, but you know the sort of thing, the squeegee balls. Or you can do it without a squeegee ball. So I want us just to do 1 minute using right nostril breathing and squeezing our right hand also, and see how we go. Not too hard. Don't want to stress the system. Okay. 1 minute. Don't do anything that makes you feel funny. Okay. You can also screw up the side of your face. But doing that with the breathing, then it all gets very complicated and counterproductive. But, you know, doing these things surreptitiously can get you out of a tight spot if you're in a very boring meeting. Just doing a little bit of surreptitious right nostril breathing and clenching can restore your faith in human beings. Now, obviously, we don't want to do slavishly do one nostril just to kind of continually buck ourselves up. And the best thing, of course, is balanced breath. Finishing, as Carol said, expiring on the left side. So let's just do a short round of balanced breath. And I'll tell you what we're going to do next time. So, you know, 2 fingers on the bridge of the nose. Going to block one nostril with the ring finger, the other nostril with the thumb, or whatever is comfortable. So we breathe in. We're going to breathe in for whatever your favorite count is. We're going to be doing balanced breath. We're going to be breathing in, starting with the left nostril, breathing in. And then we go out to the other nostril by blocking this nostril. And then this nostril, out through that nostril. In, out, in, out, in, out. And that'll good? Okay. Let's just do that for a minute. Breathing in, blocking the right nostril to breathe in through the left. Out to the right. into the right. Out to the left. And now go with whatever your ratio you prefer. Good. Any comments?
What if you do get a bit dizzy from doing that? What are you doing wrong, let's say?
If you're getting dizzy, your CO2 has probably gone down too much.
Okay.
It's almost in dizziness, wooziness, anxiety, panicky feelings, anything weird happening when you're doing a breathing exercise, you're probably lowering your CO2. I got a lot of weird things happen when I was doing stuff with Bala initially, but it went away. If you persist, sometimes your body will accommodate and will get accustomed to the deeper breathing and whatever without lowering your CO2. Your body adapts to it, but not necessarily. And I think if you're getting symptoms, you just back off to the point of, well, you stop for a start and just breathe. Very
Okay.
relaxed, very shallow, and recover. And just keep pushing the boundary. As soon as you feel the symptoms, just back off, but your body will increase tolerance over time.
Okay. Thank you.
Particularly if you're doing things along the buteyko lines, along just getting accustomed to breathing just outside your comfort zone to reset that calibration in the brain, which is saying, ooh, it's bad for CO2 to go up. A bad habit that the brain has got into, and the little capnostat has to just be reset over time. Give yourself plenty of time, 3 months minimum. But all of these things are so individual. This is why good to have a buteyko teacher, good to have a breath teacher, good to have somebody who has a capnometer, good to have a heart rate variability monitor, good to have some of these aids just to help you along the way.
Okay. Thank you. Any other final questions before we wrap this one up for week 4?
I just wanted to add that at the beginning, Paul, I mentioned that I was struggling to breathe out. For the 8, I was breathing for 4 and holding for 4. But after this whole session that we've had, I've got more capacity and I'm able to have that exhalation continue.
Great. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, so thank you.
Good on you. And look, it all improves. Just got to do it. How much do you do it? Well, you know, how long is a piece of string? I think you've got to do breath practice for at least 20 minutes a day, preferably longer, to start really getting the benefits, just like meditation. But whatever you can do, just do whatever you can do, and there will be improvement, no question. But breath
Thank
is
you.
life. And next time we'll talk about sound and light as using the breath with sound and light to infuse the energy body with some greater vitality. How good is that?
Excellent.
How good is the breath? Scott Morrison would have said.
So a part of meditation practice where you focus on the breath, which is something that I prefer to do than anything else really, is that could that be part of this breath work practice, is actually mixing meditation and breath work practice in one?
Well, look, I say to people, breath practice is the best meditation. I mean, meditation is merely the systematic application of attention in a particular way. And we have to attend closely to our breath to do it properly. So look, I think that, yeah, combining them is the ideal, and the breath practice is the anchor for the attentional component of meditation. Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Excellent. Any other questions from people? Or if you do have questions from past ones, just make some notes and perhaps bring them along to one of the sessions. I think we'll do the last session as a bigger Q&A perhaps from people. If people can't attend but do have questions, you're welcome to email myself at info@conqueringchronicillness.org, and then I can also ask them on the day as well on your behalf.
Right.
So you mentioned what we're going to be catching up with next week, which is great. And so shall we look forward to seeing you again next week, same time, same station?
Look forward to seeing you all, God willing.
Thanks kindly.
See you later.
See you, everybody.